Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing a little last minute Q&A. Now I just posted on Twitter and on Instagram last night asking you guys to send in questions because I had a few really interesting questions come in through email and Tumblr Messenger since the collab with Valerie last week. And I was thinking that's probably because there's a bunch of new people around, so it would be a good opportunity to thank Valerie again, of course. Thank you, Valerie. And to say hello to the new folks and to introduce myself. My name is Kendall. I'm a freelance illustrator and artist living and working in Boston, Massachusetts. Some of the questions that I got I won't be answering because they're things that I have covered before in other videos or I've written about on my frequently asked questions page, which is at my website, kendallhillegas.com/frequently asked questions. Oh, no, /FAQ. I'll put it on the screen here. But I am going to try to get into, I think, like 10 or 11 different questions that are either new versions of things that I've addressed before or totally new questions that I haven't talked about. I'm just going to dive right in here and start reading off some of these questions. The first one is from Tanya. And Tanya asks, how does pricing for freelance work? Do you set your price or do the clients tell you their budget? Do you charge by the hour or the size of the drawing? I have always struggled with this and it stops me from putting myself and my work out there because I'm worried that if I price my work wrong, I'm either going to scare people away or undercharge and then not look professional. So this is a huge issue and something a lot of just creative people in general, not just illustrators, but a lot of us who work on a freelance basis are concerned about. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Tanya, when you said kind of that tension between being afraid of charging too much and scaring people away and then being afraid of not charging enough and undervaluing yourself. That's something I still think about and still kind of feel worried about, especially if it's with a new client or a type of project that I haven't done before. There's always that little moment of like, oh my gosh, I don't know, what do I do? So I think that gets better with experience, but it is a very natural feeling to have. So that's the first thing I want to say. And then in specific answers to your question, do I set my price or do the clients tell me their budget? Both of them happen. So usually if it's working for a larger client, they will have a budget set in mind and they'll tell me that up front. And I like it when that happens just because it's easier and it takes the guesswork out for me. But a lot of the time if it's a smaller client, if it's like a independent magazine or a mom and pop company or somebody just starting up, then I have to quote a price. So both of those happen. And then an easy way to deal with that is you can, like if someone emails you, you can just ask, did you have a budget in mind or did you want me to quote for different options? That would be totally normal, acceptable thing to do. And then, and do you charge by the hour or the size of the drawing? Neither. I charge by the piece, so by the drawing, but rather than by the size, it's by, I guess the size does come into play, but it's a bunch of different factors. So it would be the complexity and the type of client and the use of the illustration. So like if it's going to be for editorial, that would probably be like a magazine or a newspaper. And if that's the case, then you want to think about, is it going to be a small spot illustration? So what size will it be printed at? Or will it be a full page or a half page or a cover? And each of those would affect the price. And then if it's going to be for more commercial stuff, it could be for packaging or advertising. And in those cases, there's tons of different things that it could be used for and different markets. So whether it's like in a small defined area or just your country or whether it's worldwide, and then also the length of time that the client gets to use it for. So you're probably beginning to be able to tell that pricing is a complicated issue, and I'm not going to be able to give any specifics like charge this for that drawing or that for that drawing, because there are so many factors at play, including the artist's experience, the artist's individual style, and all these other things that I just mentioned, like the client and the ways that it's going to be used. So what I would recommend is buying this book, which is upside down. Huge and very, very helpful because it lists a whole range of prices and not just like, oh, here's what you should charge for this kind of illustration, but like prices for magazines, prices for advertising, prices for apparel, and they'll always quote you a range, so that way you at least have an idea, okay, like this is the low end, or this is like right in the middle, this is the high end. And they get those prices, I believe, from surveying industry professionals, people who are in the Graphic Designers Guild. Oh, and the name of the book is The Graphic Artists Guild Handbook of Pricing and Ethical Guidelines. Yeah, so I would definitely recommend that. It's been a huge help for me. I think it's worth it, and I publish a new one, I think, like every 3 or 4 years. So I will include a link to that in the description box. And then the other thing that you could do is just Google search. And I've definitely done that before too, especially before I was using the book as much back in the early days. And again, if you're doing that, take things with a grain of salt because of all those other factors that I just mentioned, that how subjective it can be. But if you're just curious, then to try to get a sense for what a price could be or what's going on out there with other people who do work similar to yours, then Googling is also a good thing to do. But definitely recommend the book. And yes, so I hope that was helpful. Sorry I couldn't go into more specifics, but hopefully you got something out of it. The next question is from Cecile, and Cecile asks, did you ever use an agent at any point to represent you? What would be the main reason to do so in your opinion? So I've never used an agent. I don't personally know any illustrators who have used agents. I mean, I know some online who've used agents. So I can't say like why I would do it because I haven't done it, but when I've thought about it in the past, some things that have been attractive to me are the fact that sometimes, depending on your agent, they would take care of things like processing the contracts and doing the intake with the client and kind of laying down all the groundwork. So all you have to do is execute the project. And then also, this is the one that is majorly attractive, but is dealing with invoicing, because sometimes clients can take a long time to pay you, and it feels really awful when you're having to send reminder after reminder after reminder, hey, please pay me, I did my work and I need to be paid. Yeah, there's a part of me that would really like that, just not even having to worry about that. But agents take, I mean, I think on average it's about 30% of your profit or of your gross. They take a commission for their work. So that has been unattractive to me, and because I've been able to kind of build stuff up on my own, at this point I probably wouldn't sign with an agent. But yeah, I know it's something that people do, and those are a few reasons I know people do it. Yes. Okay, the next question is from Veronica, and Veronica says, I'm thinking about purchasing a drafting table. I've seen yours in your studio tour video. Are you happy with that table, and which brand is it? So it's by a company called Alvin, and I think it's the same Alvin that makes that pencil sharpener that I've talked about before, the little brass one. And overall, I do like it. It has some really cool features. It tilts up, which I hardly ever use that, so I don't know why I always mention it, but it is a cool feature. And then it has like a little pencil kind of holder at the bottom, and then some mini drawers. And another thing I really like about it is the fact that it's white, so it makes it easier to see color when I'm working on it, and it cleans up really well. Anytime I've spilled paint or gotten stuff on it, I can always scrub it out with a microfiber cloth. The things I don't like about it, I mean, it's mainly only one thing. The one thing I don't like about it is that the drawers are kind of like sitting in these little metal holders, these little metal U's, and all the time, probably like, I would say 3 or 4 times a week, I'll accidentally hit one of the drawers with a knee, and then all this stuff comes spilling out. So that is really annoying, but I'm also kind of tall, and I sometimes get really lost in what I'm doing, so I don't really pay attention to where I'm putting my body. So maybe that's just like a real problem for me, but it wouldn't bother anybody else. But yeah, I would say is like the major negative. But aside from that, it's a great table, and I like it. I've had it for a couple years. Yeah, and I will put a link to it in the description box. This next question is from Danielle, and Danielle says, I've been thinking of starting an Etsy. Is it better to sell prints or originals? I guess like that's pretty much just up to your discretion and what you want to sell on Etsy. I only sell prints, and I can tell you that the reason I only sell prints on Etsy is because I felt like I did have originals on there for a little while, but people were getting kind of confused because it was the same, there'd be the same piece listed, and one was like a much higher price than the other. So, and then also I wanted to make it really clear that all the things that are in that shop are prints, because I didn't want somebody to be buying a print and thinking it's an original. And even though I say it multiple places in the listing, I just wanted to be really clear about that I'm just selling prints. But you could get around that by like having your listings for originals look different from your listings for prints. It also would simplify it, I guess, if you're selling both of them there at the same time. Since I've kind of moved away from that, and I've sold most of my originals either in person or through my website, it's been easier for me just to have those separated. But again, it's like a really personal decision based on like how you want to set up your Etsy shop and the kinds of things you want to sell. Yeah, so I don't think there's a right answer to that. It's just what you want to do with your art. This next question is from, I think it's GINI. I don't know if it's GINI or GINI, but she asks, how do you stay motivated, especially working from home on an off day? I just wrote a huge post about this on Tumblr the other day, so I'm gonna link to that as well, either on the screen or in the description box. But I can say that I think staying motivated overall for me it feels very internal, and for whatever reason, I love being alone. I like working by myself. I'm pretty introverted, and I think that makes my personality a good match with being a freelance illustrator, because I don't really need a lot of interaction with other people to stay motivated. But if you are the kind of person who does really thrive on that kind of communal connection and motivation from other people, then I would ask someone who has that same personality how they do it, because I honestly don't know in that regard. But I can say just from my perspective, like being an introverted person who likes to work alone, I think it's helpful to stay organized and to have an idea of like what I want to finish in a given week. I find that motivating. So usually I will like kind of start out the week and think about what are the projects I need to get done, like what deadlines do I have, what are the kind of larger, longer projects I'm working on, what stage do I need to get to, and then if there are any personal projects I'm going to be working on, like making videos, for example. And then if I'm having an off day, like actually this is kind of in the forefront of my mind because I did just have a couple of off days. Because I've been working in my spare time and the time that I've been working on personal projects, I've been trying some more experimental things and just trying out different combinations of media and different substrates. And sometimes that can be awesome, but I had a few projects in a row, kind of just like a few personal projects in a row kind of flop. It felt like it to me. It just felt like they didn't turn out how I wanted, and then there was this one that I was going along really well and I really liked how it was turning out, and then I overworked the paper, so I ended up kind of ruining it, which I very rarely will just like stop on a piece or say, oh, this one's trashed, I have to start over. I really try to work through frustration and keep going even if I have to take a break. So yeah, it was really frustrating to have a piece that I actually couldn't go any further on. So in that case, I just set that aside and took a break. So sometimes I'll need just like 30 minutes or an hour, in which case I'll go for a walk or have a cup of coffee, maybe look at some stuff on the internet. And then if I'm like really frustrated or feel like I'm really hitting my head against the wall and I don't know where to go with something, I will just switch gears and move to a different project. So I don't have a lot of experience with just feeling like I can't do anything or I'm not motivated to do any work at all. Usually my inertia or lack of motivation will come from frustration with a particular project, in which case the main way I would stay motivated is just to switch gears and work on something else. And I feel like usually the problem that I'm stuck on will present itself to me in a different way, or I'll be able to think of something, more creative solution after I've had a little bit of space from it. So I hope that was helpful. I guess I could do a full video on that too, like staying motivated and planning your week. Yeah, let me know if that's something that you're interested in. The next question is actually another one from Veronica, and she asks, do you prefer hot press or cold press, and why? I like both. I like both hot press and cold press. It really depends. The paper that I choose to use will depend on the project, and I think I've talked about this before, but mainly cold press has a lot more texture. So if I'm painting something that has a lot of texture in it, like a pastry or some produce, but mostly like baked goods, I will almost always choose hot press, or excuse me, cold press, because that subject is pretty textural anyway, so it just kind of amplifies it and helps get that look that I'm going for. And then if I'm working on something that is smoother, like if it's anything man-made, or actually even like if it's people, if it's something that has like a really fine texture, then I will usually opt for hot press because it's just works better with that subject, and that way I'm not like fighting the natural texture of the paper. Next question is from Mario. How do you know which medium to use for each stage of a painting? And this is another question I think I could definitely do a full video on. I'm actually kind of thinking about it, how I would want to approach that. I've been thinking about it for a little while, so that probably will come at some point. Again, let me know in the comments if that's a video that you're interested in. But I would say basically I evaluate similar to how I would with the paper. I evaluate, okay, what's the texture of the subject? What final look do I want? Do I want it to be textural? Do I want it to be smooth? Do I want it to be shiny? And then if I'm layering things, so say I have a layer of watercolor down, I can pretty much put anything on top of watercolor. But if I have a layer of wax pastel down, the water soluble wax pastel, my options are more limited for what I can put on top. So that's evaluating basically like whether something is water-based or oil-based or wax-based. And a big way that I figured that out is just by trial and error and experimentation and layering different media on top of one another. Oh, another thing I would consider is opacity. So if like watercolor is extremely translucent, so if I have some area of like really dark dense color, you can get that with watercolor, but most of the time I don't try to do that because I feel like I can easily use colored pencil or gouache to get that effect a lot easier. Yeah, so I guess like texture, finish, opacity, and then being sure to consider like whether you're putting a water-based thing on top of a oil or wax-based thing. And yeah, it can be, not that that could never happen, because you can put gouache, which is water-based. You can put gouache on top of pencils, which are wax-based, as long as you're using a paper that has enough texture. But the reason that works is because the gouache has an acrylic binder in it. So like you couldn't do that with watercolor. You couldn't put watercolor on top of colored pencils because it would just, like there would be nothing for it to absorb and stick to. So yeah, I think probably I should go over that in more detail, like the different combinations and stuff in a different video, but that's a little bit of an overview. The next question is from Katie. When painting with watercolor, how do you ensure pencil lines don't show through? Unfortunately, this is a question I get quite frequently actually, but there isn't really a way to do that aside from like making sure that your pencil lines are really light, which sometimes I'm good at doing, but a lot of the time I'm not good at doing because I have a really heavy hand. If you go too heavy, I would recommend definitely trying to erase them before you get started with the watercolor, because once you put watercolor over the pencil, it's going to be really difficult to erase. So yeah, basically try to keep your lines as light as possible before you use the watercolor. And I mean, another thing that you could do would be to use watercolor pencils for your sketch, because then they'll kind of blend in, but those aren't erasable or not fully erasable. So it's a toss-up, but yeah, just basically try to keep it light, and that's the best way to keep them from showing through. And even if they do show through a little bit, I kind of like seeing that because it's a way of seeing the process and seeing how the painter was thinking about it when they were making it. So yeah. And the last question is from Kelly, and Kelly asks, how do you strike the balance between time making art slash time spent doing everything else, which is posting it online, making prints, etc.? How much time do you dedicate per week to just making the art? I think that is a difficult thing to balance, and particularly in the world that we live in with the internet and social media and YouTube and all these different things, you can spend so much time not only sharing your content on there, but like just looking at stuff that other people have made. And that's great, but like you said, it does need to be balanced with time dedicated to just making art. So overall, I would say for me, it really varies from week to week. There are some weeks that I spend exclusively making art, especially if I have a lot of deadlines. And then if I have more flexibility in a given week, generally the way I try to structure my time is that I get up fairly early, like usually around 7. So I try to start working in the morning and not do anything online, not even email really, until after lunch, just because for me, I feel like I'm the most creative and the most productive with regard to creativity earlier in the morning. So I try to just set aside that time to only be painting. And that's something I can do because I am freelance. So I know for other people who are working day jobs, it will be different, and you'll have to think about like, well, what time do I have that I can set aside? But I think it's important to have that dedicated time where I'm not distracted by anything online and I'm not thinking about anything else besides just making the work. And then in the afternoons, I'll do stuff like answer email, maybe edit videos. So yeah, so for me, it really kind of varies week to week, but overall it's important to have time set aside where you are just making stuff, and to not, for me anyway, to not get too caught up in the rest of it. But that's not to say that the rest of it, the online and the making prints and the email, isn't important, because it is really important, and it would be very hard to make a living as a creative person without those things. So yes, as you say, it's a balancing act. So that is it for this video. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Thank you very much to everybody who sent in questions. And again, I'm sorry if I didn't answer yours. Please do check out my frequently asked questions page and look through maybe the answered questions page on Tumblr. I will link both of those in the description box, as well as linking to my other Q&A videos. Yes, so let me know what you guys think about the video on mixed media and how to combine and layer mixed media. And then what was the other one I said I might do? Oh, staying motivated, I think. Yeah, let me know what you guys think about those videos, or if there's another video that you want to see, or if you didn't get a chance to ask your question because I did only just send out the invitation last night. Feel free to leave the question in the comments and I will try to include it in the next Q&A video, or you could always email me or message me or find me on Twitter or Instagram, which will all be linked below as well. Yes, so hope you guys liked the video, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.